My husband sold me across a dinner table, and he did it in a language he thought I'd never understand. 17 years of marriage, and Owen still didn't know the woman sitting across from him had spent 4 years in Madrid, 2 more in Mexico City, close enough to boardrooms, full of men who spoke exactly like this, men who believed a woman's silence meant she understood nothing at all. He raised his glass to a stranger and said the words that ended us right there, under the chandelier of a restaurant he'd chosen, because he thought it would impress everyone but me. He never once considered that I might be listening. Owen had been planning this dinner for weeks. The rooftop restaurant at the Belmont Hotel in Chicago, white tablecloths, a wine list he'd memorized just to look effortless. He told me it was the most important night of his career. Rafael Serrano, a private investor with more money than patience, was deciding whether to put $18 million behind a medical distribution project Owen had been chasing for almost 2 years. Northbridge Medical Systems needed this deal. Owen needed it more. 3 days before he'd bought me a dress. Deep navy, the kind of expensive that makes you hold your breath when you check the tag. I thought for one foolish second that it was a gesture of love. Then he handed it to me and said, "Don't talk too much tonight. Rafael likes elegant women, not women who feel the need to prove how smart they are." I let that sentence sit in the room without responding to it. I'd learned over 17 years that some comments were better absorbed than fought. We married young. I was 25, full of momentum, working compliance risk assessments for American companies expanding into Mexico, Colombia, Spain. I was good at it. I could read a balance sheet the way other people read faces, and I could catch a lie buried 3 clauses deep in a contract, written in a language my husband couldn't even order dinner in. Then my mother had a stroke, and Sophie was still in diapers, and Owen said the words every ambitious man says to the woman holding his life together. "We're a team. You take care of things for a few years, and when my career stabilizes, you go back to work." A few years became nearly a decade. He never asked what those years in Madrid had actually taught me. He never wondered not once how fluent I really was, because he never thought to wonder about me at all. The dinner started politely enough. Raphael was courteous but guarded, a man who watched more than he spoke. He didn't look at me the way Owen probably expected him to. If anything, he seemed uncomfortable every time Owen refilled my wine glass, a little too eagerly, a little too fast. Owen talked big. Projections, timelines, numbers that didn't quite match what I'd glimpsed on his desk at home months ago. Numbers that had grown suspiciously kinder to his case since then. Raphael asked about patent ownership, about hospital certifications. Owen's answer wandered vague and rehearsed, and then the moment his English started failing him, he slipped into Spanish. He thought it made him safe. He leaned toward Raphael, voice low, casual, like men trading a joke between themselves. "Don't worry about her," he said. "Tonight she's yours. Sign the agreement in the morning." Raphael did not smile. He set his glass down and told Owen flatly that he had never asked for anything like that. Owen pressed on anyway, oblivious to the way the air had changed. "I know what men like us have to do to close a deal like this. She'll listen. She always listens." I didn't flinch. I didn't drop my fork or gasp, or give him the reaction he was used to getting from me when he pushed too far. I set my wine down, slowly smiled the way I'd smiled at 100 dinners just like this one, and said in English, "Excuse me, I need to use the ladies' room for a moment." Owen didn't even look up. I walked away from that table, with my heels steady on the marble floor, and my pulse steadier than it had any right to be. Behind me, I could hear him already moving on, already selling something else, some other version of me he thought was still sitting there. In the bathroom, I locked myself into a private stall, pulled out my phone, and called a number I hadn't dialed in 6 years. Owen thought I was in there crying. I was calling the one person who could end his deal before it ever began. The woman I called was Isabel Serrano, Raphael's older sister, and the person who actually controlled the family's investment fund. Years earlier, I'd worked a compliance review on a Serrano capital deal in Mexico City, back when I still had a career and a name people trusted. I'd found a chain of shell companies buried in the paperwork, the kind of thing that would have cost the family millions if it had gone unnoticed. Isabel remembered that. She remembered me. We hadn't spoken in 6 years, but I'd kept her number the way you keep an old key. You're not sure you'll ever need again. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm having dinner with your brother, I said, my voice low, and even despite the stall door pressing cold against my back. My husband just offered me to him in exchange for a signature on an investment contract. Silence stretched for a few seconds. Then carefully, did my brother agree to this? No, Raphael refused. But my husband said something else. He said the hospital certifications were just a formality, that they'd be sorted out after the money transferred. That got her attention faster than the first part had. Isabel was in the hotel 1 floor down, preparing for tomorrow's investment meeting in a private conference room. She told me to go back to the table. Don't confront him. Don't warn him. Keep the call connected in my pocket and let her listen. I straightened my dress, checked my reflection, steady eyes, nothing betraying me, and walked back into the dining room like nothing had happened at all. Owen asked if I was okay. I told him I'd just felt lightheaded. He nodded, already turning back to Raphael, already slipping back into Spanish, to boast that I was easy to manage, that I didn't understand the first thing about business. I let the words wash over me, and reached for my water glass, tipping it just enough to spill a little onto the tablecloth, an excuse to bend down to reach into my bag, to tap the recording app Maya had installed on my phone months ago, back when I still thought I'd never need it. Raphael's patience was thinning visibly now. Don't bring your wife into this, he said flat and final. Owen barely paused. Everyone has a price. Hers is just attention. That was the moment the door to our private dining room opened. Isabel walked in with the fund's legal counsel. A step behind her, composed, unhurried. Dressed like someone who'd already decided how this evening was going to end. In Spanish, she said, "It seems I've arrived at exactly the right moment." Owen turned. I watched the color drain from his face in real time. Watched him do the math. Watched him realize this wasn't just Raphael's sister making a social appearance. Isabel held 52% of the voting shares in Serrano Capital. Without her signature, there was no $18 million. There was no deal at all. She sat down beside me and switched to English, addressing Owen directly. You said the hospital certifications could be handled later. Can you explain that? Owen denied it, instantly smooth as ever, suggesting Isabel had misheard something lost in translation. That Spanish carried nuance that didn't always survive the crossing into English. That was when I spoke, for the first time all night, in perfect, unhurried Spanish. There was no nuance. You said exactly that the certifications were a formality. Then you said I would listen because I always listen. Owen went completely still. Raphael looked at me, then at Owen, understanding something over his face that he too had been used, positioned as a prop, in something that could have quietly destroyed his reputation if he hadn't pushed back. Isabel didn't kill the deal on the spot. She announced a 72-hour hold pending an independent review, which was in some ways worse for Owen than an outright rejection. An insult could be walked back. A review meant someone was looking for something specific. It meant they suspected the numbers themselves. The drive home was silent, except for Owen's fury simmering just beneath a thin, controlled surface. He accused me of humiliating him in front of the most important investor of his career. What humiliated you? I asked, watching the streetlights slide across the windshield. The fact that I understand Spanish, or what you actually said. He didn't answer that. Instead, he pivoted the way he always did toward fear dressed up as reason. If the deal collapsed, we could lose the house. Sophie might not have money for college. Everything I had, he reminded me, came from him. I should call Isabel in the morning and smooth it over, tell her it was a misunderstanding. Nothing more. I told him I needed to sleep on it. He believed in that particular way. Men like Owen always believed that he still had time to talk me back into agreement. That night, once his breathing had settled into the rhythm of a man who thinks he's already won, I got up and checked my credit report on my phone. The blue light, the only thing illuminating the dark of our bathroom. 3 business loans, $1. 4 million combined, all of them in my name. I had never signed for any of them. I had spent the whole night thinking the worst thing Owen did was offer me up like a bargaining chip. But my name was already sitting on debts large enough to take everything I had left. I made coffee the next morning like it was any other day. Eggs, toast, the same quiet kitchen routine I'd performed for 17 years, because the most dangerous thing I could do right now was let Owen see the woman who'd spent half the night staring at a credit report with her hand pressed over her mouth. He watched me across the counter, searching for cracks. I gave him none. "I'll call Isabel," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. But first I need to understand exactly what I'm supposed to say." Relief moved through him so visibly it was almost embarrassing. He launched into his explanation, already rehearsed, already smoothed at the edges. The comment at dinner was just business culture. A joke that landed wrong. Raphael's fault as much as the wine's. I apologized for overreacting. I watched him relax into the story he needed to believe. The one where his obedient wife had simply had too much to drink and too little perspective. He left for work, convinced I'd folded back into the shape he preferred. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I called Maya Collins, a friend from another life, back when we were both 20-something, and certain the world owed us something. She was a fraud litigation attorney, now sharp in a way that made people nervous in depositions. I hadn't spoken to her in years either, but some friendships apparently don't need maintenance, just the right kind of emergency. She gave me a list before I'd even finished explaining. "Don't sign anything. Change every password, email, banking, everything. Freeze my credit. Back up every piece of evidence I could find. Don't let Owen know what I'd discovered, and find out if there were any accounts or companies registered under my name that I didn't know about." I drove straight to her office. We found the loans first, 3 of them structured as collateral for Owen's project. If the Serrano deal closed, he could quietly pay them off before I ever noticed they existed. If it collapsed, I would be the one holding $1.5 million in debt I never agreed to. Then Maya found the contract. My signature was on it, not close identical down to the slant of the L in my last name. Owen had lifted it from paperwork we'd filed together 3 years earlier when we refinanced the house. One document listed me as co-founder and financial guarantor of something I had never heard of in my life. I had never co-founded anything. I had trusted my husband to handle our taxes, our filings, the paperwork of a marriage, and in doing so, I'd handed him every signature he'd ever need to build a version of me that didn't exist. That night, once Owen was asleep, I thought about the small safe in his closet, the one he never talked about and I never asked about. I knew the code, his late father's birthday. The same 4 digits he used for half his passwords, because Owen had never been as clever as he believed himself to be. Inside, I found copies of my ID and passport, a financial power of attorney I had never signed, loan guarantee documents with my name typed neatly at the bottom, and 2 versions of the same equipment testing report, one showing the device had passed certification cleanly, the other, the real one, showing a failure rate well above what any hospital board would accept. I sat on the closet floor holding both pages, understanding for the first time that this wasn't only about money. If that device reached hospitals, it wouldn't just be my name at risk, it would be patients. At the bottom of the folder was a life insurance policy, $2 million, my name on it. Owen listed as primary beneficiary, purchased 6 months ago, right around the time the loans had started. Maya, when I called her, was careful not to let me spiral. A policy alone proved nothing. Plenty of husbands insure their wives out of nothing more sinister than habit. But combined with the forged documents and the debt, it painted a picture of a man constructing a system where I absorbed all the risk, and he collected all the reward. I lay awake replaying small moments that suddenly wore a different meaning. Owen insisting I see a doctor his insurance company had specifically recommended. The offhand questions about blood pressure medication asked twice, 3 times more than curiosity required. The remote cabin trip he'd proposed for after the deal closes. The joke, the one he'd made once at a dinner party, laughing that if I died, he'd at least stop worrying about Sophie's tuition. I didn't know, not with certainty, whether Owen intended real harm or simply saw the policy as another form of collateral. But I knew I couldn't keep sleeping beside him without protecting myself either way. Maya laid out a plan with 3 parts. Shield me from financial liability. prove Owen had forged my signature and falsat the report. Find out who inside Northbridge had helped him bury the truth. I couldn't leave the house yet. If I disappeared too soon, he'd have time to destroy evidence or worse. I had to keep playing the wife trying to save the deal, smiling at dinner, asking small harmless questions, giving him nothing to suspect. I was gathering my things to leave Maya's office when my phone lit up with a message from Owen. Someone from the company is coming by this house tonight. I need you to sign a confirmation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I handed the phone to Maya without a word. She read it twice, then looked up at me calm and certain. Don't refuse. Let him bring the paperwork. We need to see exactly what he's trying to make you sign. Owen came home that evening with a man I'd never met, Caleb Moore, some junior legal manager with a nervous habit of clicking his pen. Between them, they slid a confirmation letter across our dining table, like it was nothing more than a formality. It stated that I had known about and consented to guaranteeing the loans, that I'd played an advisory role in the project, that my previous signatures were all valid, that any confusion at the Belmont dinner had simply been the wine talking, nothing more. I let my brow furrow the way a confused, overwhelmed wife's brow might furrow. I asked why this needed to happen tonight of all nights. Because Isabel is turning one sentence into an investigation. Owen said, his patience thinning at the edges. Sign it, and everything goes back to normal. I told him I needed my reading glasses and carried the papers into the other room where I photographed every page and sent them straight to Maya before folding the documents back exactly as they'd been. When I returned, I said I wanted my old friend, the lawyer, to review it first. I didn't sign. Owen's jaw tightened, but with Caleb sitting right there, he couldn't push the way he wanted to. He'd have to wait. Buried in the paperwork was a name I recognized, Nina Patel, the project's former financial director. She'd approved the first budget draft, but somewhere along the way, her name had vanished from every recent report. I remembered Owen once mentioning almost dismissively that Nina couldn't handle the pressure and had quit without notice. Maya hired a licensed investigator to track her down. Nina refused to talk at first. She'd signed an NDA, taken a severance payout, built a wall around whatever she knew. I sent her one line myself. Owen used my name to guarantee numbers you refused to sign off on. She agreed to meet within the hour. What she told us reframed everything. The device had failed an independent inspection. Owen had asked her to adjust the failure rate. When she refused, he threatened to expose a minor accounting error from her own file. Nothing criminal, but enough to end a career if he wanted it to. Caleb had been drafting an NDA to keep her quiet permanently, and Owen had told her more than once that Serrano's investment would wash away every problem once it landed. Some of that money, she said, had already moved through a consulting firm called Foster Advisory Group. I had never heard of it. A quick search told me everything I needed to know. It was registered under my name. The address on file was a P.O. box Owen had rented months ago. He wasn't just forging my signature, he was using my identity as a wall between himself and money that shouldn't exist. Before she left the company, Nina had quietly copied everything. Emails where Owen demanded the report be altered. The original spreadsheet with the real numbers. Meeting notes where Owen said plainly, "Once the money's in the account, nobody cares about the first version." Why are records showing transfers to the company registered under my name? She was afraid of lawsuits, of losing her license, of becoming the story instead of the witness. I didn't pressure her. I don't need you to save me, I told her. I just need you to stop letting his silence protect him from doing this to someone else. She agreed to hand everything over to Maya on the condition that she'd be legally protected. When I got home, Owen was waiting, asking where I'd been. I told him I'd visited an old friend. He checked my phone's location history, but I'd left my old device at a coffee shop near the house hours earlier deliberately, the way you leave a decoy behind. He had no proof of anything, only a growing unease he couldn't quite name, and it made him watch me more closely than he ever had before. That night he asked almost too casually, "You're still on my side, right?" I looked at him steady and said, "I'm trying to protect this family." He heard exactly what he wanted to hear. I meant something entirely different. Nina sent one more file before I went to bed. An old recording she'd kept from a meeting months back. Owen's voice, unmistakable, talking to Caleb. If Claire finds out, just tell her she already signed it. After 17 years, nobody's going to believe a housewife over a VP. I listened to it twice, sitting alone at the kitchen table in the dark. The phone's light, the only thing between me and the silence of the house. Then I called Maya. Now, I said. I want him to say that again, to my face. Maya confirmed the legal ground first. The state allowed one party to record a private conversation without notifying the other. But to be safe, she wanted more than a phone in a pocket. She booked a small conference room at her firm, one with a clearly posted notice that audio and video could be recorded on premises, and rented it under a consulting company's name, so Owen wouldn't recognize it as hers. I texted him the bait. I've been thinking I'm ready to sign, but I want to understand exactly how I'd be protected if the deal falls apart. He answered within minutes, eager, already suggesting the hotel lounge where we'd first met Raphael. I redirected him to the conference room instead, framing it as more private, more serious. He didn't question it. He believed finally that his wife had come around. I walked into that room playing every part of the frightened, compliant woman he expected. I let my voice tremble slightly when I mentioned the house. I brought up Sophie's tuition, our reputation, the terrifying thought of starting over at 42 with nothing. Owen softened instantly, falling into the tone he always used when he thought he had the upper hand, patient, condescending, almost gentle. You don't understand business, he said. You just need to trust me. I asked why my name was on the loans. Banks trust a family business more, he explained. Using my name was just a formality. And my signature? I signed for you. You always sign what I hand you, anyway. I let that sit in the air a moment before pressing further. So, if something goes wrong, I'm the one responsible? He smiled, actually smiled, and said, only if the deal fails, and it won't fail as long as you do your part. I asked what exactly my part was. That was when he admitted it, casual as ordering coffee. He'd thought Raphael might be drawn to me, thought it would make him look generous, willing to go further than any other partner Raphael might consider. He tried to soften it even as he said it. I didn't actually mean for anything to happen. I just needed Raphael to believe I'd do whatever it took. Including offering your wife to him? His patience cracked. Don't turn this into some moral thing. This is $18 million. That sentence alone would end up meaning more than almost anything else he said that day. The plainest confession of what I'd always suspected, but never had proof of that. To Owen, I had always been worth less than the number on a contract. I kept going, telling him Isabel wouldn't reinstate the deal without a clean certification report. He didn't even hesitate. That report only needs to exist long enough for the money to transfer. After that, we switch component suppliers and fix everything quietly. And the hospitals that already ordered the device, nobody's in danger. It's just how the numbers get presented. I let him keep talking. He admitted Nina had been pushed out for not knowing how to be flexible. Every sentence out of his mouth was another nail. And he didn't even notice he was building his own coffin. At the end, I slid the unsigned confirmation letter across the table and asked if he'd be willing to write in his own hand that I had previously given him permission to sign documents on my behalf. He laughed at the suggestion, said he wasn't stupid enough to put something like that in writing. That's fine, I said. You just said enough. Something in my tone finally reached him. He looked around the room properly for the first time, noticed the small recording notice posted near the door, and I watched the blood drain from his face exactly the way it had at that first dinner. Only this time, there was no Raphael to soften the blow. He stood, demanded my phone. I didn't move. Maya walked in with a security officer a step behind her. She informed Owen calmly that he wasn't permitted to approach me or my documents, and that the bank had already been notified of suspected forgery. He pivoted to threats, told me I was about to destroy Sophie's future. No, I said. You already put her future on falsified debt. I'm just stopping you from finishing the job. He walked toward the door, and just before leaving turned back. Nobody at that company is going to believe you. Maya looked at me once he was gone. He still thinks this is just his word against yours. Then let's give him a room full of people who are done staying quiet. The next morning, Isabel called. The $18 million signing ceremony was still scheduled, but it wouldn't be a signing anymore. It would be a board hearing, and Owen had no idea it was coming. Owen believed he'd won. The meeting notice landed in his inbox, and he read it exactly the way I knew he would, as proof that Isabel had backed down, that Claire had gotten scared, that the world was once again bending toward him. He put on his best suit that morning, rehearsed a speech in the bathroom mirror, and texted me before he left. "After today, I'll decide if this marriage is even worth saving." I didn't answer. The ceremony was held at Northbridge's headquarters in a boardroom, with a view expensive enough to distract from anything uncomfortable happening beneath it. Richard Hale, chairman of the board, sat at the head of the table. Raphael and Isabel Serrano arrived together along with board members, legal counsel, and a representative from the bank. Owen came in with Caleb trailing behind him, like a shadow that hadn't yet realized it was about to be cut loose. Maya and I waited in an adjoining room with Nina. We weren't announced yet. Owen opened the meeting the way he opened everything: growth projections, vision statements, talk of trust and responsibility to patients, calling the project the future of ethical healthcare, with a straight face that almost impressed me even now. When he finished, Richard asked legal to confirm the paperwork was in order. Before anyone could answer, Isabel spoke. She wanted clarity on the ownership of Foster Advisory Group before any signature touched paper. Owen said it was his wife's consulting company. Richard asked if I was involved in management. Owen, without missing a beat, said I was fully aware and had consented to everything. That was my cue. I walked in. I didn't accuse him right away. I simply said, "I have never operated Foster Advisory Group. I have never received $1 from that company, and I have never signed a single guarantee tied to it." Owen recovered fast, telling the room I was upset over marital issues, that this was personal, not professional. Maya stepped forward with the folder she'd been building for weeks, a forensic signature analysis registration records tied to an email account Owen controlled, upload logs showing the documents had been created from his own office computer, my credit report, the wire transfers. Page after page laid out with the calm precision of someone who had done this before and would do it again. Owen turned on. Caleb said he'd only been following instructions. Caleb, pale and sweating, insisted he hadn't known the signatures were forged. Then Nina walked in. She confirmed everything: the pressure to falsify the certification report, the threats, the wire transfers into the company bearing my name. Owen called her a disgruntled former employee. She said nothing in response. She simply pressed play on the recording she'd kept, and Owen's own voice filled the room telling Caleb that nobody would believe a housewife over a vice president. The silence that followed had weight to it. Richard Hale looked directly at Owen. "Is the housewife you're referring to the same woman currently standing in this room?" Owen didn't answer. He couldn't. Then Maya played the recording from the conference room, every admission laid bare in his own voice. That he signed for me, because I always signed what he handed me. That the debt was only dangerous if the deal failed. That the certification report only needed to survive long enough for the wire transfer to clear. That the dinner with Raphael had been nothing more than proof he'd do anything for $18 million. Raphael stood. He told the board plainly that he had never asked for or accepted anything involving Claire as part of any arrangement. Isabel followed, announcing that Serrano Capital was withdrawing from the deal entirely and forwarding every document to the appropriate regulators. Owen's composure finally broke. He stopped denying and started pleading that I'd misunderstood, that everything he'd done was for this family, that the company would collapse. Without the deal, that hundreds of employees could lose their jobs, that I was letting emotion destroy everything he'd built. "You didn't build this for the family," I told him. "You used the family as collateral." Richard ordered Owen's phone and building access revoked on the spot, security escorting him from the room. Caleb was suspended before the door had even closed behind them. On his way out, Owen turned back one last time. "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me." "You didn't give me a life," I said. "You built a cage and called it protection." He tried to step toward me. Security blocked him before he got close. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I watched the man I had once loved get walked out of a room he believed would be his greatest triumph. When the door finally shut, Maya leaned toward me, her voice low. "This isn't over yet. He still owns half the house. He still has access to accounts." I looked down at the divorce filing already sitting in my bag, papers I'd prepared days ago waiting for exactly this moment. "Not for much longer," I said. In the weeks that followed, the consequences moved faster than I expected. Owen was terminated from Northbridge for fraud, forged records, and breach of fiduciary duty. The company self-reported to the medical device regulators. The banks froze every loan tied to his name and mine. A forensic handwriting review cleared me of liability once the forged signatures were confirmed. Foster Advisory Group was dissolved. Prosecutors opened a formal investigation. Caleb cooperated in exchange for a reduced charge. Nina was compensated, and her professional reputation quietly restored. Serrano Capital walked away from the investment, but Isabel stayed close enough to help Northbridge rebuild the project under a safer, honest process, one that didn't require anyone's silence to survive. I won't pretend Owen faced immediate, dramatic justice. That's not how these things actually go. He was facing multiple charges, and the legal process was still grinding forward, slow and unglamorous, the way real consequences usually are. The divorce itself was its own kind of battle. I filed and requested a temporary restraining order. No access to the house, no moving assets, no contact with Sophie outside of a lawyer's presence, no chance to quietly delete anything electronic before discovery could reach it. Owen tried predictably to turn our daughter against me. He told her I'd destroyed the family. I didn't retaliate by handing her every ugly detail. I gave her only what a 16-year-old needed to carry. "Your father made some very dangerous decisions," I told her, sitting across from her at our kitchen table. My hands wrapped around a coffee mug I wasn't drinking from. "I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you to understand that staying quiet doesn't always hold a family together." She was angry at first, confused, caught between two versions of the same story. But once she read the parts of the case file appropriate for her to see, something in her shifted. She stopped seeing this as her mother's revenge and started seeing it for what it actually was. I sold the house once the settlement cleared. It had never really felt like mine anyway. Every room decorated to impress people Owen wanted something from. I moved into a smaller townhouse near Sophie's school, modest, quiet, entirely my own. There was no fairy tale windfall waiting for me on the other side of that courtroom. I had to rebuild my credit from the ground up, refile years of tax paperwork that had been handled and mishandled without my knowledge, learn how to manage accounts that weren't shared with anyone, step back into a job market I'd been absent from for almost a decade, and somewhere underneath all of it, sit with the quiet shame of realizing how many warning signs I'd let pass, because believing him had always been easier than questioning him. Isabel, true to her word, connected me with a healthcare compliance firm looking for someone with exactly my background. I didn't get the job out of pity. I sat through interviews, took a technical assessment, competed against candidates half my age with resumes that hadn't gone quiet for 10 years. I earned the position the same way I'd earned everything before Owen convinced me to set it aside. I started part-time. Within months, I was leading the risk investigation team. A few months after the hearing, Owen requested a meeting through our attorneys to finalize the plea and asset division. He looked smaller across that table. Then I remembered the confidence gone something hollow in its place. "I just need you to trust me one more time," he said. "I trusted you for 17 years, I told him. Trust was never what you were missing." He asked quietly if I'd ever actually loved him. "I loved the man I thought you were," I said. "I won't keep sacrificing for the one you chose to become." I signed the papers. I stood up. I walked out without looking back. Sometimes I think about that dinner at the Belmont, the exact moment my marriage actually ended. It wasn't the divorce filing. It wasn't the courtroom. It was a restaurant table, chandeliers overhead. My husband speaking a language he assumed I didn't understand. But the moment that mattered most wasn't his sentence at all. It was mine, the choice not to react the way he expected. I didn't beg. I didn't make a scene. I didn't warn him. I listened. And for the first time in longer than I could admit, I trusted what I heard with my own ears more than I trusted his explanation for it. They say a marriage ends the day the papers are signed. That wasn't true for me. Mine ended at a dinner table in a language my husband thought I couldn't hear, but my life didn't end there. It started again. Because the moment a man decides your dignity is a fair price for his ambition, you stop owing him the job of protecting his dreams. You start protecting yourself. What would you have done if you heard your husband say those words? Would you have confronted him right at the table, or waited the way I did until you had enough proof to make it undeniable? Tell me in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. If Claire's story gave you something to sit with, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We have so many more stories like this one waiting for you. At 2:07 on a Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a message that destroyed 23 years of marriage in less than 15 words. It wasn't from a stranger, it wasn't from a scammer, it was from my husband. I ran away with your best friend. We're never coming back. There was a photo attached. The two of them stood barefoot on a beach in Cancun, champagne glasses raised toward the camera as if they had just won the lottery. My husband smiled wider than I had seen him smile in years. My best friend leaned against him, wearing the necklace I had given her for her 45th birthday. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I replied with only 2 words. Good luck. Then I canceled every card, changed every lock, and quietly went to bed. The next morning, the first people knocking on my front door weren't my husband or my former best friend. They were the police. My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 45 years old, and until that Tuesday, I believed I understood exactly what my life looked like. I worked as a senior accountant for a regional logistics company outside Columbus, Ohio. My days revolved around spreadsheets, quarterly reports, and helping small business owners untangle financial disasters. Numbers rarely lied, people did. Ironically, I had forgotten that last lesson inside my own home. Our brick house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, lined with maple trees that turned brilliant shades of orange every autumn. Children rode bicycles in the evenings. Neighbors waved while walking their dogs. It wasn't a wealthy neighborhood, but it was peaceful, and every mortgage payment had been made on time, because I insisted on planning our finances carefully. The house was legally mine. Most people didn't know that. When Ethan and I married 23 years earlier, my grandmother had helped me buy the property before the wedding. Later, Ethan moved in after we married. We renovated together. We built memories together. But legally, the deed never changed. Neither did the investment accounts my father had left me after his passing. Those decisions had never mattered before until they mattered more than anything. Ethan Bennett was 48, charming when he wanted to be funny enough to make a room like him, and persuasive enough to convince people that every setback was temporary. He owned a small construction company that had done well for years, before projects started drying up. Whenever money became tight, I covered the difference. I told myself that was what marriage meant. You carried each other. At least that's what I believed. Rachel Brooks had been my closest friend since college. We survived terrible apartments together, impossible professors, broken hearts, weddings, miscarriages, promotions, funerals, birthdays, and every ordinary Tuesday in between. She knew every secret I'd ever trusted another human being with. When Ethan forgot our anniversary, Rachel reminded him. When I was overwhelmed at work, Rachel brought dinner. When my mother died, Rachel stayed in my guest room for nearly a week. She wasn't just family. She felt safer than family, which explained why the photograph from Cancun hurt more than I thought anything ever could. I stared at the image for nearly a minute after replying. Not because I hoped it wasn't real, because I noticed details. The hotel bracelet around Ethan's wrist, the expensive sunglasses Rachel wore, the ocean behind them, the champagne. None of it had been paid for with their money. It couldn't have been. I knew exactly how much remained in Ethan's business account. I knew exactly which credit cards they carried. I also knew which cards were connected to my accounts. That realization settled over me like cold rain. I opened my banking app. 3 supplementary credit cards appeared beneath my primary account. Mine. Ethan's, Rachel's emergency card. Years earlier, Rachel had borrowed one during an overseas trip after her wallet had been stolen. She'd eventually returned it, but I'd forgotten to remove her authorization because she never used it again. Or so I thought. I opened the transaction history. Hotel Riviera Cancun, luxury resort dining, private yacht charter, designer boutique, spa, thousands of dollars, charge after charge after charge. My pulse never sped up. Instead, it slowed. That frightened me more than panic would have. Because when I became completely calm, I usually made permanent decisions. I called the credit card company. "Good evening," the representative answered cheerfully. "I need to cancel every supplementary card immediately. May I ask why?" "Because the authorized users no longer have my authorization." She processed the request in less than 5 minutes. Every card became useless. Next came online banking, passwords, security questions, two-factor authentication, wire transfer permissions. I changed everything. Then I searched for a 24-hour locksmith. The dispatcher sounded surprised. "You need every lock changed tonight. Every single one." An hour later, a gray pickup truck pulled into my driveway. The locksmith was probably 60 with tired eyes and rough hands. He looked at the house, then at me. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "No," I answered honestly. "But it will be." He never asked another question. For nearly 2 hours, the sound of drills echoed through my quiet neighborhood. Front door, garage entry, back patio, basement entrance. Every old lock disappeared into a bucket beside his truck. Every new key landed in my palm. When he finished, he handed me 3 copies. "You want extras?" "No." "You sure? I don't think I'll be trusting many people after tonight." He nodded with the kind of understanding that comes only from someone who has seen too many marriages end. After he drove away, I walked through the silent house. Nothing looked different. The photographs remained on the walls. Ethan's reading chair still sat beside the fireplace. Rachel's favorite coffee mug was still in my kitchen cabinet because she'd practically lived here during football season. Yet, the house felt different, lighter, as if it finally belonged to the person whose name had always been on the paperwork. I slept nearly 6 uninterrupted hours. That surprised me. I expected nightmares. Instead, exhaustion won. At exactly 7:18 Wednesday morning, violent pounding rattled the front door. Not knocking, pounding. 3 heavy blows, then another. I slipped on my robe and walked calmly toward the entrance. For one brief second, I assumed Ethan had discovered his cards no longer worked. Maybe he'd come home angry. Maybe he'd come begging. Maybe both. I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch, one older, one younger. Neither looked angry, but both looked serious. I unlocked the new deadbolt, leaving the security chain in place. The older officer removed his hat. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning. Are you Olivia Bennett?" "Yes." He exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking again. "Mrs. Bennett, we've received a complaint from your husband." He paused. "And we need to ask you a few questions." The older officer waited patiently while I removed the security chain and opened the door the rest of the way. "I'm Officer Daniels," he said, extending a hand. "This is Officer Ruiz." I shook both hands. "Would you like to come in?" "We would appreciate that." Their eyes briefly swept across the entryway. They noticed the fresh deadbolt, the clean hallway, and probably the faint smell of sawdust left behind by the locksmith. Neither commented. I led them into the living room, where morning sunlight spilled through the bay window onto hardwood floors. Ethan and I had refinished together, almost 15 years earlier. For a fleeting moment, I remembered him laughing as he accidentally splashed stain across his jeans. The memory disappeared as quickly as it came. Officer Daniels remained standing. "I'm afraid your husband contacted local authorities early this morning. He claims you've locked him out of the marital residence, frozen his access to family finances, and illegally taken control of jointly owned assets." His tone wasn't accusatory. It was procedural. I folded my hands calmly. "I see." Officer Ruiz studied my face. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." Officer Daniels continued. "Mr. Bennett says he attempted to purchase airline tickets home this morning, but every credit card was declined. He also claims you emptied the accounts." "I didn't empty anything." "So, you did cancel the cards?" "Yes." Officer Daniels gave a slow nod. "Can you explain why?" Instead of answering immediately, I walked into my home office. I'd always believed important conversations deserved documents, not emotions. Inside a gray filing cabinet sat neatly labeled folders arranged alphabetically. Home, insurance, retirement, property, banking. I returned carrying 3 folders and placed them carefully on the dining room table. Officer Ruiz exchanged another glance with his partner. "I thought you might ask questions," I said. Officer Daniels opened the first folder, the property deed. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "This house belongs to me." He read the date. "Purchased 6 months before your marriage." "Correct. And Mr. Bennett was never added to the title." "No." Officer Ruiz quietly read over his shoulder. Neither officer said anything for several seconds. Officer Daniels closed the folder. "Mr. Bennett described this as our house. It was our home." I chose my words carefully. "Legally, those aren't always the same thing." The second folder contained investment records, retirement accounts, and beneficiary documents. Everything predated my marriage. Everything remained in my name. Officer Ruiz finally spoke. "So, these accounts also belong to you. They're not joint accounts." "No." "What about the credit cards?" "They're attached to my accounts. Ethan had an authorized user card." Officer Daniels leaned back slightly. "So, canceling them was my legal right." He nodded once. "I believe it was." Silence settled across the room. Outside, someone pushed a stroller along the sidewalk. A lawnmower started somewhere down the block. Ordinary Wednesday morning sounds. Inside my dining room, 23 years of marriage were quietly being reduced to paperwork. Officer Daniels closed the final folder. "Mrs. Bennett, may I ask what happened?" I reached for my phone. Without saying a word, I opened the message Ethan had sent 8 hours earlier. Then I handed it across the table. Officer Daniels adjusted his reading glasses. Officer Ruiz leaned closer. Neither officer spoke while they read. The photograph lingered on the screen. Ethan Rachel Champagne Conan. Finally, Officer Ruiz exhaled softly. "So," he looked almost embarrassed. "They actually sent you this at too late this morning." Officer Daniels returned the phone. "I understand why you changed the locks." I offered a small smile. "I thought you might." He hesitated. Mr. Bennett neglected to mention this part." "I'm sure he did." The older officer looked around the room again. "Did he ever threaten you?" "No." "Did he ever become violent?" "No." "Then why change every lock instead of just asking him not to come home?" I looked toward the front door. "Because he already told me he wasn't coming home." Officer Daniels nodded slowly. "Fair point." Officer Ruiz shifted in his chair. "What about the money?" "He insists you drain the accounts." "I transferred nothing from any account that belonged to him." "You only removed access?" "Exactly." "Would you mind showing us?" I logged into my online banking account. The screen filled with balances, transactions, authorized users. Officer Ruiz watched quietly. Everything was still there. Nothing had disappeared. Officer Daniels pointed toward the transaction history. "Would you scroll back?" I did. Hotel charges, restaurants, luxury shopping, spa services, boat excursion. Every expense had occurred in Cancun. Every expense had been charged against supplementary cards connected to my primary account. Officer Ruiz frowned. "When did these begin?" I kept scrolling. Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon. The charges had started before Ethan even sent his dramatic message, as though he'd assumed I'd never notice. Officer Daniels rubbed his chin. "Looks like they were enjoying themselves." "I suppose so." Then something caught my eye. A transfer. $8,000, unknown recipient. The timestamp showed 3 weeks earlier. I frowned. "That's strange." Officer Daniels looked up. I don't remember authorizing this." I clicked. Another transfer appeared. 6,000, then another. 4,500. Different dates, different amounts. Always approved electronically, always from my account. A cold pressure settled across my chest. "I'm sorry." I leaned closer to the monitor. "I've never seen these." Officer Ruiz stepped beside me. "You didn't make them." "No." My accounting instincts took over immediately. Ignore emotion, follow numbers. I filtered transactions by electronic transfers, the screen populated with dozens of entries, some small, some surprisingly large. None looked familiar. Officer Daniels quietly observed. "How often do you review these?" "Monthly, and you never noticed." "I review statements." I clicked another tab, but these were hidden among routine business reimbursements. I opened the recipient details. Several accounts, different banks, different names. The total climbed higher with every calculation running through my head. 10,000, 20, 32. Nearly $40,000 gone, not overnight. Over almost 11 months, my breathing remained steady. Years of accounting had trained me well. Panic later. Evidence first. Officer Ruiz looked concerned. Mrs. Bennett, I think my husband has been stealing from me. Neither officer interrupted. I continued opening records, transfer after transfer. Some referenced construction materials, others consulting fees. Several had no explanation whatsoever. Officer Daniels finally spoke. You should contact your bank immediately. I will. And probably an attorney. I know one. His expression softened. For what it's worth, this appears to be much larger than a marital disagreement. I agree. Officer Daniels closed his notebook. I'm documenting exactly what we've seen today. Officer Ruiz added quietly. There doesn't appear to be any criminal issue regarding the locks or the cards. I didn't think there would be. Officer Daniels stood. If Mr. Bennett attempts to force entry into this house, call us immediately. I will. If anyone threatens you, I'll call. He offered one final look around the room. I'm sorry your morning started this way, I smiled politely. My morning actually started at 2007. For the first time, Officer Daniels almost smiled back. After they left, I locked the front door. Not because I was afraid, because habits mattered. The house became silent again. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, pulled every financial record from the previous year. By noon, my dining room table had disappeared beneath stacks of statements, tax documents, wire confirmations, and credit card summaries. The deeper I looked, the worse everything became. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This had been planned, funded, carefully hidden, and somehow I had balanced everyone else's books while failing to notice someone had been quietly rewriting my own life. I reached for my phone. One name came immediately to mind. Lauren Hayes, the best financial litigation attorney I'd ever worked with. She answered on the second ring. Lauren Hayes. It's Olivia Bennett. A brief pause. Olivia, you sound different. I need a lawyer. Another pause. Then her voice became all business. What happened? I stared at the latest unauthorized transfer glowing on my computer screen. My husband ran away with my best friend, and I think he may have committed fraud. There was complete silence. Then Lauren spoke 6 words that changed everything. Don't touch another single document. Lauren Hayes arrived at my house just after 3 that afternoon, carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase and a legal pad. Rest. She didn't waste time with sympathy. That was one of the reasons I had called her instead of anyone else. She set her briefcase on my dining room table, now buried beneath bank statements, receipts, tax documents, and handwritten notes. You've already done half my job, she said as she looked over the piles. I've spent 20 years finding accounting errors. She gave me a faint smile. Then today, let's find something even more valuable. The truth, the evidence. For the next 3 hours, neither of us talked very much. We worked. Lauren reviewed every unauthorized transfer while I traced each payment back through my bookkeeping software. Whenever we found something unusual, she marked it with a yellow tab. Daddy. Soon, the table looked like a sea of yellow paper. Look at this, she finally said. She slid 3 statements toward me. At first, they looked unrelated. One payment had gone to a luxury apartment complex downtown. Another had been wired to a luxury car dealership. The third was labeled only as consulting services. Different dates, different recipients, different amounts. What do they have in common? I asked. Lauren turned the pages around. The receiving bank. I stared for several seconds. Every payment had ended in the same 4 account numbers. So, she nodded. They're all feeding the same account. I felt my stomach tighten. You think Ethan opened another account? I think Ethan opened one he never wanted you to see. We requested additional transaction details through my bank. Because I was the account owner, they agreed to provide everything connected to the outgoing transfers. While we waited, Lauren asked another question. Tell me about Rachel. The name felt strange now, as if it belonged to someone I had never actually known. We met in college. You trusted her with everything. Did she ever borrow money? No. Did she ever have financial problems? I paused. Not until about a year ago. Lauren looked up. What happened? She lost her marketing job. I remembered comforting Rachel over coffee. She had cried. She worried she would lose her condo. She said she couldn't sleep. I had believed every word. So that's when Ethan started helping her. Lauren asked. I assumed he was just being kind. Lauren wrote something on her legal pad. Or they were already planning this. The sentence hung in the air. I wanted to reject it immediately. Instead, another memory surfaced. Rachel's suddenly driving a newer SUV. Beery designer handbags she joked she'd found on sale. Weekend trips she could somehow afford despite being unemployed. I had accepted every explanation because I trusted the person giving it. Trust, I realized, had been my blind spot. My phone buzzed. The bank. The representative emailed the expanded transfer records while staying on the line. I opened the file. Lauren moved beside me. There it was. Every outgoing transfer, every destination account, every authorization code, and something neither of us expected. Lauren leaned closer. Olivia, I see it. The authorization wasn't mine. The system showed electronic signatures, but the IP address attached to each approval originated from Ethan's office. Not our home, his office. I clicked another record. Same thing, another same result. Lauren slowly closed the laptop. This just became much more serious. You think he forged my authorization? I think he intentionally created the appearance that you approved transfers you never saw. I looked across the room, toward the family photographs still sitting on the bookshelf. One picture showed Ethan and me celebrating our 20th anniversary. Another included Rachel, standing between us laughing. The three of us looked like people who would always trust each other. Appearances I thought could survive long after the truth had disappeared. Lauren broke the silence. There's more. She opened one of the supporting documents. This apartment downtown. What about it? It isn't rented under Ethan's name. I frowned. Rachel. Lauren nodded. The lease belongs to Vanessa Rachel Brooks. My chest tightened. So, I've been paying her rent. It appears that way. We continued following the money. Furniture store, insurance payments, utility deposits, even grocery deliveries. Piece by piece, a second life emerged from the paperwork. Not a spontaneous affair, a carefully financed escape, one that had been built with my money. I leaned back in my chair. I kept thinking the affair was the betrayal. Lauren folded her hands. It wasn't. It was the cover. She nodded once. Exactly. As evening settled outside, we ordered takeout. Neither of us touched until it had gone cold. The more we uncovered, the less hungry I became. Near 7:07, another notification arrived, this time from my email account. An automatic security alert. Someone had attempted to log into my cloud storage from Cancun. The attempt had failed because I had changed every password the previous night. Lauren looked at the screen. They're looking for something. My financial files or your tax records. Maybe both. I suddenly remembered something else, my digital signature. Lauren looked at me sharply. What about it? Ethan insisted. Did I scan it years ago? He said it would make business paperwork easier whenever I was traveling. Where was it stored? I pointed toward an old external hard drive sitting in my desk drawer. Lauren didn't say a word. She connected it to my laptop. Folders appeared. Taxes, insurance, photos, estate planning. Then another folder. Business. I frowned. I've never opened that one. Inside were dozens of PDF files, contracts, loan applications, vendor agreements. Many carried what looked like my electronic signature, except I had never seen most of them. Lauren read silently for several minutes before speaking. Olivia. Her voice had changed. This isn't just unauthorized spending anymore. I looked at her. What is it? I believe your husband used your signature on financial documents without your knowledge. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Outside rain began tapping softly against the kitchen windows. I closed my eyes for only a moment, not because I wanted to escape, because I needed one steady breath before facing whatever came next. When I opened them again, Lauren was already organizing the evidence into separate folders. Fraud, unauthorized transfers, false authorizations, possible forged signatures. She looked at me with the calm confidence of someone who had walked into difficult courtrooms for 20 years. Starting now, she said, you do not answer Ethan's calls. I wasn't planning to. You don't answer Rachel either. I won't. If either of them comes here, I call the police, she nodded. And if they apologize, I surprised myself by smiling. They're welcome to apologize. Lauren waited. but they'll do it through their attorneys. She smiled for the first time that day. Good. She packed the files into her briefcase, leaving copies neatly stacked on my dining room table. Before reaching the front door, she stopped. I have one piece of advice. Mott, I'm listening. People who think they've gotten away with everything almost most always make one final mistake. What kind of mistake? They come back. I watched her drive away through the rain. The house was quiet again. For the first time since receiving Ethan's message from Cancun, I wasn't wondering whether he'd return. I knew he would. He simply had no idea that when he did, I wouldn't be waiting with tears. I'd be waiting with evidence. Lauren's prediction took less than 48 hours to come true. Saturday afternoon was unusually warm for early spring. I was trimming the rose bushes along the front walkway when a taxi slowed to a stop in front of my house. I recognized Ethan before he even stepped out. The confidence he'd worn in the Cancun photograph was gone. His polo shirt was wrinkled, his beard had grown in unevenly, and the expensive sunglasses he had proudly worn on the beach were nowhere to be found. Rachel climbed out after him. She carried 2 oversized suitcases and a designer handbag I had unknowingly paid for. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the tension between them. They weren't speaking. So much for paradise. I quietly set the pruning shears on the porch and walked inside before either of them reached the front steps. 3 firm knocks echoed through the house. Then Ethan's voice. Olivia. I didn't answer. Another knock. Olivia, I know you're home. Only then did I unlock the door, keeping the security latch in place. Ethan forced a smile. There you are. I looked at him calmly. What do you need? His smile disappeared. My cards aren't working. I know. We've been trying to reach you. I know. You changed the locks. Yes. Rachel stepped forward. You've made your point. I looked at her for the first time since Cancun. No, Rachel, I haven't. She folded her arms. We just want to come inside and talk. You told me you were never coming back. Ethan sighed dramatically. We said a lot of things. No, I corrected him. You texted exactly 3 sentences. He rubbed the back of his neck. Can we not do this outside? No. The silence stretched long enough for a neighbor across the street to glance toward us while collecting her mail. Ethan lowered his voice. The hotel froze our reservation. I'm sorry to hear that. Our accounts aren't working. I know. We've been living out of suitcases for 2 days, I know. His patience cracked. Olivia stopped saying, You know I know because I canceled the cards. Rachel took another step. You had no right. I couldn't help smiling. I had every right. She laughed sarcastically. Everything Ethan has belongs to both of you. Actually, I tilted my head slightly. The bank disagrees. Ethan's jaw tightened. We're married. We are. So half of everything is mine. I looked directly into his eyes. Then your attorney should have no trouble proving that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rachel finally broke the silence. We just need enough money to get back on our feet. I almost laughed. My retirement savings weren't meant to finance your honeymoon. It wasn't a honeymoon. No, you don't understand. I understand exactly what you told me. I reached into the entryway cabinet and removed a large manila envelope Lauren had prepared the previous evening. What is that? Ethan asked. I slid it through the narrow opening in the door. He opened it. His face slowly lost color. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Request for temporary financial injunction. Motion to preserve assets. Lauren had moved fast. Very fast. You already filed. I did. You didn't even talk to me. You announced the end of our marriage from a beach. Rachel glanced over Ethan's shoulder. What does that mean? He swallowed hard. It means he stopped reading. It means she's freezing everything. I nodded. Every account connected to me. His eyes widened. My business will continue using the accounts legally registered to your company. He stared at me. You knew? I know a great deal more now than I did 3 days ago. A flicker of panic crossed his face. What does that mean? It means Lauren has been very busy. Rachel suddenly looked nervous. Who's Lauren? My attorney. Ethan took one quick step toward the door. You hired a lawyer. I hired the right lawyer. His breathing changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. He realized this wasn't an emotional argument. It was becoming a legal case. Rachel grabbed his arm. Let's just get our things. I nodded toward the garage. They're already packed. Both of them turned. The boxes sat neatly stacked beneath the covered driveway. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every jacket, every kitchen gadget they'd purchased together. Nothing damaged, nothing thrown away. Simply packed with the same care I'd once used while wrapping Christmas presents. Rachel frowned. You packed all this? I had time. Ethan walked slowly toward the boxes. He picked up one labeled office, another labeled winter clothes, a third read family photos. He opened it. The framed pictures were individually wrapped in newspaper. He looked back at me. You left the pictures. They belong to your memories, too. For the first time since arriving, guilt briefly appeared on his face. It vanished almost immediately, Olivia. His voice softened. We made a mistake. I said nothing. We can fix this. No, I never meant to hurt you. You didn't plan to get caught. His shoulders slumped. Rachel looked irritated. Ethan. He ignored her. I'll end it. I studied him carefully. With Rachel? Yes. Rachel's head snapped toward him. What? He didn't look at her. I'll come home. The words hung in the air, not because they were convincing. Because they arrived far too late. I shook my head slowly. You didn't leave because you were confused. You left because you believed I'd always be here. He opened his mouth again. Before another word could leave it, 2 patrol cars turned onto my street. Blue lights flashed silently. Rachel stiffened. Ethan, I know. Officer Daniels stepped out of the first cruiser. Officer Ruiz followed behind him. They both recognized me immediately. Officer Daniels approached calmly. Good afternoon, Mrs. Bennett. Good afternoon. He looked toward Ethan. Mr. Bennett. Ethan forced a smile. I wasn't causing trouble. Officer Daniels remained expressionless. We received a report that someone was attempting to enter a residence after being instructed not to. I wasn't forcing my way in. No. The officer nodded. But you've been asked to leave. Ethan looked at me. You called them? Yes. Officer Ruiz stepped beside the stacked boxes. Looks like your belongings have already been prepared. Rachel whispered something under her breath. Officer Daniels continued. Mr. Bennett, unless Mrs. Bennett invites you inside. You need to remain off the property. We're still married. Officer Daniels nodded. And this property is currently titled solely in Mrs. Bennett's name. Ethan stared. How do you know that? We've already reviewed the documentation. His face went completely pale. The confidence he had carried into Cancun finally disappeared. Rachel looked back and forth between us. This is unbelievable. No, I said quietly. This is paperwork. Officer Daniels waited while Ethan loaded the final box into the taxi before closing the trunk. Ethan turned toward me one last time. This isn't over. I met his eyes without raising my voice. I know, but next time. I glanced briefly toward Officer Daniels. Bring your attorney. The taxi pulled away without another word. I stood on my porch until it disappeared around the corner. Officer Daniels approached before returning to his cruiser. Everything okay? For the first time in days. I took a slow breath. I think it will be. He nodded. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. So do I. As the patrol cars drove away, my phone vibrated. A new email from Lauren. The subject line contained only 5 words. They've officially responded. Court date scheduled. I opened the attachment. 4 weeks. In exactly 4 weeks, everything Ethan had tried to hide would become part of the public record. The courthouse looked exactly the way I remembered from years earlier when I had testified in a routine business dispute on behalf of my company. Gray stone, metal detectors, quiet conversations, people pretending they weren't nervous. This time I wasn't there. As an accountant, reviewing someone else's mistakes. I was there because my husband had spent nearly a year stealing from me, while convincing the world he was the victim. Lauren met me outside the courtroom carrying 2 organized trial binders. Every document had color-coded tabs. You look calm, she said. I am good. She handed me a bottle of water. Don't volunteer information. Answer only what's asked. Let the documents do the talking. That had become our strategy. Facts over emotion, evidence over outrage. As we entered the courtroom, Ethan was already seated beside his attorney. He wore a navy suit I had bought for him on our 20th anniversary. Rachel sat 1 row behind him. She avoided looking at me. For the first time since Cancun, she looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. Whatever fantasy they had imagined had clearly collapsed long before today. Ethan looked confident, too confident. His attorney, Mark Ellison, stood and greeted Lauren with a polite handshake. Good morning. Morning, Mark. I hear you've built quite a case. Lauren smiled faintly. I've simply organized the truth. The BAF called the room to order. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and an expression that discouraged unnecessary speeches. Everyone stood, then we sat. Mr. Ellison spoke first. Neat, Your Honor. This case is fundamentally about a marriage that ended badly. My client made poor personal decisions, but Mrs. Bennet reacted by financially destroying him. She froze assets, denied access to marital resources, and acted out of revenge rather than necessity. He spoke smoothly, confidently. If I hadn't lived through the past month, I might have believed him. When he finished, the judge turned toward Lauren. Miss Hayes, Lauren stood. This case is not about a broken marriage. She paused deliberately. It's about financial deception. She placed the first binder before the judge. My client did not remove assets from Mr. Bennet. She opened the binder. She protected assets that legally belonged to her after discovering they had been used without her knowledge. Judge Whitmore nodded. Proceed. Lauren projected the first exhibit onto the courtroom screen, the Cancun photograph. Then Ethan's text message. I ran away with your best friend, Bice, we're never coming back. No one spoke. Lauren clicked again. Credit card statements appeared. Hotel charges, restaurants, luxury shopping, private excursions. Each charge highlighted. Each connected to my account. She didn't dramatize anything. She simply read dates and amounts. The silence became heavier with every slide. Then came the bank transfers, one after another. Apartment lease payments, vehicle deposits, insurance premiums, furniture purchases. Rachel slowly lowered her head. Lauren continued. These transfers originated from accounts solely owned by Mrs. Bennet. She displayed the authorization logs. The approvals appear to bear Mrs. Bennet's electronic signature. Another click. IP addresses. Every authorization originated from Ethan's office. Not my home, not my workplace, his office. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Mr. Ellison, the attorney, adjusted his glasses. My client acknowledges making transfers. Lauren interrupted gently. With permission, Ellison hesitated. We maintain there was implied marital consent. Lauren walked to the evidence table. I'd like to call Mr. Bennet. Ethan took the witness stand. He looked composed. Lauren approached slowly. Mr. Bennet, did your wife know about the apartment leased under Ms. Rachel Brooks's name? No. Did she authorize you to pay that lease? No. Did she know you used her account to do so? No. The courtroom remained silent. Lauren didn't raise her voice. Were you having a relationship with Ms. Brooks at that time? Ethan swallowed. Yes. And you used your wife's money to support that relationship? He hesitated. Yes. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. Lauren waited until the room settled. Mr. Bennet, did your wife ever authorize these transfers in writing? No, verbally. No. Did you tell the bank she had approved them? He looked toward his attorney. Judge Whitmore answered for him. You'll answer the question. Yes. Lauren nodded once. No further questions. The judge turned toward Mr. Ellison. Redirect. He stood but looked noticeably less certain. No questions. Rachel was called next. She walked to the witness stand without looking at me. Lauren spoke kindly. Miss Brooks, did you know where the money came from? Rachel's fingers tightened around the armrest. At first, she stopped. At first, Ethan said they shared everything, and later I found out it was Olivia's. When she closed her eyes briefly, about 3 months before Cancun, Lauren paused. Yet, you continued accepting payments, Rachel whispered. Yes. Ethan turned sharply toward her. You said we weren't talking about that. Judge Whitmore immediately intervened. Mr. Bennet, you'll remain silent, Rachel continued. I asked him several times if he was going to tell Olivia, and he kept saying there'd be plenty left that she'd never notice. For the first time that morning, Ethan looked genuinely frightened. Lauren displayed one final exhibit, the recovered email folder. Inside were contracts containing my electronic signature. Lauren addressed the judge. A forensic document examiner reviewed these files. She handed over the report. The electronic signature was copied from a previously authorized tax document and reused without Mrs. Bennet's knowledge. Judge Whitmore spent several minutes reading. No one spoke. The only sound in the courtroom came from papers turning. Finally, she looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Bennet. He slowly stood. This court was initially asked to resolve a marital property dispute. She placed the report on the bench. What I now see is evidence suggesting possible financial fraud and unauthorized use of another person's identity. The room became perfectly still. Judge Whitmore continued. The civil issues before this court are straightforward. She looked toward me. The residence remains the sole property of Mrs. Bennet. She turned to Ethan. The disputed accounts belong to Mrs. Bennet. Another pause. The unauthorized transfers appear undisputed. She signed several pages. The court orders immediate reimbursement of recoverable marital funds, affirms the temporary financial injunction, and grants Mrs. Bennet exclusive possession of the residence pending final dissolution. Ethan's shoulders dropped, but the judge wasn't finished. She lifted the forensic report once more. This court is referring these additional findings to the appropriate investigative authorities. Mr. Ellison closed his eyes briefly. He knew exactly what that meant. Lauren quietly squeezed my arm beneath the counsel table, not in celebration, in reassurance. As the hearing concluded, Ethan finally looked at me. For weeks, I had imagined that moment. I expected anger, maybe regret. Instead, I saw confusion, as though he genuinely couldn't understand how everything had unraveled so completely. The answer had never been complicated. It wasn't Cancun, it wasn't Rachel, it wasn't even the affair. It was the moment he convinced himself that the truth would stay buried forever. As the bailiff announced the hearing adjourned, Lauren gathered our binders. Outside the courtroom, she allowed herself one small smile. The hardest part is over. I looked back through the courtroom doors as Ethan remained seated beside his attorney. No, I said quietly. For him, it's only beginning. 3 months after the hearing, the house felt quieter than it ever had before. Not empty, quiet. There is a difference. Empty is what I felt. In those first few days after Ethan left, when I still expected to hear his keys hit the bowl by the front door, or Rachel's laugh drifting in from the kitchen, like she still belonged there. Quiet came later, after the shock had faded, and the room stopped waiting for people who no longer deserved to enter them. By June, I had changed more than the locks. I changed the curtains in the bedroom. I donated the oversized recliner Ethan had claimed as his throne in the living room. I took down every photograph that made me feel like a fool for trusting what had been standing beside me. Then slowly, I put up new ones. A picture of my sister and me at Lake Michigan, both of us wind-blown and laughing. A framed watercolor from a local art fair. A photo of my mother holding me when I was 5. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. Just proof that my life had existed before Ethan Bennet and would continue after him. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday afternoon in a small conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. Ethan sat across from me, with his attorney thinner than I remembered his suit, hanging differently on his shoulders. Rachel was not there. She had left him sometime after the fraud referral became real. According to Lauren, she was cooperating with investigators in exchange for her own protection. I didn't ask for details. There are some things you stop wanting to know, because knowing them won't give you peace. The final agreement was simple. The house remained mine. My retirement accounts remained mine. Ethan was ordered to repay a substantial portion of what he had taken through the sale of business assets and structured payments monitored by the court. His construction company, already unstable, collapsed under the weight of liens unpaid vendors in the investigation. I did not smile when Lauren explained it. I did not celebrate when the judge signed the final decree. I simply breathed. For 23 years, I had thought marriage meant carrying the heavy things together. What I had not understood was that Ethan had slowly handed me every burden and called it partnership. After the papers were signed, he followed me into the courthouse hallway. Olivia, I stopped but did not turn immediately. Lauren remained beside me. Ethan looked at her. Can I speak to my wife alone? Ex-wife, Lauren corrected. The word landed cleanly. Ex-wife, not wife, not partner, not the woman waiting at home while he built a second life with her money. I finally faced him. You can speak here. His mouth tightened, but he nodded. I know you hate me. I don't. That surprised him. Maybe it surprised me too. Hate required a kind of closeness I no longer felt. He looked down at his hands. I ruined everything. Yes, I was stupid. No, I kept my voice calm. Stupid is forgetting an anniversary. Stupid is buying the wrong paint color. What you did was deliberate. he flinched. For a moment, the man in front of me looked less like a villain, and more like someone who had finally reached the end of his own excuses. I don't know how I became that person, he said. I believed him. Not because he was innocent, because some people destroy their lives one small justification at a time, and only recognize themselves when the damage is too large to hide. I hope you figure it out, I said. He looked up. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought about the Cancun message, Rachel's necklace, the bank transfers, the forged signatures, the police on my porch, the courtroom. Then I thought about the quiet house waiting for me with sunlight, falling through new curtains I had chosen myself. I already stopped letting you live inside my head, I said. That's all I can offer. His eyes reened. I didn't stay to watch the tears come. Outside the afternoon was warm and bright. Lauren walked me to my car without speaking. Just before I opened the door, she handed me the final signed copy of the decree. You're free, she said. I looked at the papers, then at the courthouse steps, then at the sky. No, I said softly, I'm safe. That summer, I learned how many ordinary things can feel extraordinary when no one is taking pieces of you in secret. I bought peaches at the farmer's market without checking whether Ethan had made another unexplained withdrawal. I slept through the night without waking to review bank alerts. I invited my sister Claire over for dinner and cooked salmon the way Ethan had always claimed he hated. We ate it on the patio with cheap white wine and bare feet propped on the opposite chair. You seem different, Claire said. I am different. Better. I watched a robin hop along the fence, the more honest. That was the truest answer I had. I joined a weekend financial literacy program for women rebuilding after divorce. At first, I volunteered only because Lauren suggested it might help someone. Then one Saturday morning, a woman about my age stayed after class, with a folder clutched to her chest. My husband handles everything, she whispered. I knew that whisper. I knew the shame inside it. I pulled out a chair and sat with her for nearly an hour. We didn't fix her whole life that day, but we opened her first bank statement together. Sometimes freedom begins with a password only, you know. In August, an envelope arrived from the court, confirming Ethan's first repayment had been processed. The amount was smaller than what he owed, but it was real. I placed the check on my desk and stared at it for a long time. Then I deposited it into a new account labeled Garden Fund. By September, the backyard had changed completely. Raised beds, lavender, tomatoes, a small stone path leading to a wooden bench beneath the maple tree. I hired a local carpenter to build the bench, and when he asked what inscription I wanted carved into the back, I thought for several days. In the end, I chose 5 words. She chose herself and stayed. The first time I sat there alone, I cried. Not loudly, not painfully, just enough to honor the woman who had answered a cruel message with 2 calm words, and then saved her own life, one decision at a time. Late one evening, as the air cooled and the first leaves began to turn, my phone vibrated on the patio table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I opened the message. It was Ethan. Can we talk? No apology, no explanation, just another request. Another door he expected me to open because I had opened so many before. I stared at the screen. For a long moment, I remembered being 22 and believing love meant never giving up. Then I thought about being 45 and understanding something far more important. Love without respect becomes a debt you pay forever. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. The sky above my backyard had softened into deep blue. Somewhere nearby, wind moved through the maple leaves. My house glowed behind me, warm and steady. Every lock changed, every room reclaimed. Ethan had thought he was leaving me with nothing. He never understood that what he took with him was the life I no longer wanted. And what he left behind was mine, my home, my money, my peace, my name. If this story touched something in you, maybe because you've been betrayed, used, or made to feel guilty for protecting yourself, I want you to remember this. Starting over is not failure. Sometimes it is the first honest thing you have done for yourself in years. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And let me know if you've ever had to choose yourself after someone took your kindness for weakness. Your story matters more than you think. And if you want more stories about strength, dignity, and second chances, subscribe and stay with us. We have many more journeys to share, and I would be honored to have you here for the next.